one other individual join us, our moderator, but we're going to get started, right, Fredrika and Caroline and Ellen and Gayla? I think we're all going to go through some introductions first, just to talk a little bit about us and what we do. And I guess I'll start off. My name is Kerrigan, and I am president and CEO of the Small Business and Entrepreneurship Council. And we're an advocacy, research, and education organization dedicated to protecting small business, promoting entrepreneurship. I actually founded the organization 26 years ago. So for that long period of time, we've been working on the range of issues that impact the ecosystem for startup activity, strong small business growth. I'm also the chair of the Small Business Roundtable, which is a coalition of leading small business organizations that work on inclusive opportunity and access. I am a board member and former chair of the Center for International Private Enterprise, which works to strengthen democracy around the world through private enterprise and market-oriented policies. And just have had the opportunity to travel all over the world with the State Department, with SITE, working on women's leadership issues, women's entrepreneurship issues, helping to build the capacity of women's associations and organizations to strengthen and build and foster ecosystems for women's leadership and entrepreneurship. So that's who I am, and I look forward to this conversation. And I guess, Caroline, we'll move over to you.
Thanks, Karen. That was wonderful. And to everyone, I'm so excited to be here today and just hear a bit about your backgrounds. My background is I'm Caroline Healey. I'm the recruitment and marketing manager with Antler in the US. Antler is a global early stage VC founded in Singapore in 2017. We have 12 offices across 6 continents, and our US office has been up and running for a little over a year. Prior to Antler, I worked in finance and media. So it's really wonderful to be able to transfer over that background and support our founders that are building their dreams and solutions to some of the most pressing problems that we face as a nation and as a global society. So I'll pass it over to Ellen next.
Thanks, Caroline. My name is Ellen Bateman, and I am the Director for U.S. Ecosystems at the Global Entrepreneurship Network. We run a variety of programs and initiatives in over 180 countries, seeking to help people at any stage of their entrepreneurial journey with access to our network and a variety of programs, everything from competitions to conferences and Global Entrepreneurship Week, where we celebrate entrepreneurs for 1 week each November.
Hi, everyone. I'm Gayla Jennings O'Byrne. I'm based here in New York and had a career in technology, the early days of the internet and Java, and then went on to have a career on Wall Street at JP Morgan. And I kind of bundled all of that together, and I left a job I loved, a company I loved, because I wanted to start making sure that women, and particularly women of color and diverse, inclusive teams, were getting the capital to really build the companies that they were working so hard to grow. And so I'm pleased to say that myself and my colleagues have started a venture fund called WOCstar, stands for Women of Color Stars. We think they're all rock stars. And we invest in early stage tech companies in areas like media and data, virtual reality, ag tech, ed tech, and fintech. And happy to be on this panel with some amazing women on stage and in the audience. So thanks for having me.
And I'll just introduce myself too. So I'm Fredrika Wessman. I'm the partnership manager at Norrsken Foundation. And Norrsken Foundation is a Swedish nonprofit founded by unicorn entrepreneurs that wanted to take their capital, their experience, their learnings, and dedicate that towards growing the next generation of entrepreneurs. But not just any type of entrepreneurs. We specifically support impact entrepreneurs, so companies that are trying to make the world a better place. So that can be startups that have solutions to food waste or mental health issues, or that are creating electrical airplanes, literally anything that helps make a positive impact for society or the environment. We run Europe's biggest hub for impact and tech entrepreneurs in Stockholm, Sweden. We're setting up our next hub in East Africa later this year. And we also run a European venture capital fund as well as an African seed fund. So what we do is just to support these startups grow, and so their solutions can benefit society faster. And my background is within working with NGOs as well as with tech startups. And I think Norrsken is the perfect combination of doing good and using the agility and the level of high innovation level from the startup world.
Great. Well, I happen to have our sort of a cheat sheet on everything we're going to be covering, and of course, talking about ecosystems, strengthening ecosystems, and first, in terms of the defining ecosystems, sort of the definition that we're going with today is an ecosystem is defined as a community on a high level, but also on a micro level of smaller ecosystems and subsector industries. So, all of us are part of ecosystems that support women entrepreneurs. And with respect to those ecosystems, who would each of you say are the most important actors in the ecosystem? From your perspective, obviously, from you all do different things, but who would you say are the most important actors from your perspective? And anyone can jump in and unmute themselves. Caroline, any thoughts? Or
Certainly, I'll jump in, and everyone feel free to chime in. I think when we look at people who are in the positions of political and economic power, those are the people that are shaping the framework and the foundation of our ecosystems. And when I think about VC specifically, I look at the people who are deploying capital. It's no secret that females have a harder time emerging as founders. And I think if you look at the larger ecosystem where we can really push to expand and increase the number of female entrepreneurs and founders, is by also pushing for an increasing number of female fund managers. Mm-hmm. Female funds have increased 15-fold over the past decade, but there's still so much room for improvement in terms of building out those networks and providing resources that promote female fund managers. And that means, I think, when we're looking at the LPs that are going to distribute money and deploy capital into funds, they need to be open to investing in women that might not have the same track record in terms of having past fund experience, that come from, still very, very traditional backgrounds, in the sense that they have operational experience and stellar resumes, but not necessarily the cookie cutter mold of what we're looking for in terms of the funding perspective. So that's certainly something that is, I think, a top priority at this point. 5% mm-hmm. of funds are led by women, something around there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And Gayla, any thoughts? I'm going to go around the little circle here that I see in our boxes, if that makes sense. So
yeah, absolutely. And I don't think any of us are too shy to jump in here either. But it's really interesting, your question about where ecosystems and what are the important ones. I think so often we see sort of the big names and the big influencers and, the folks that are in the headlines. And I actually think we should kind of take a step back and sort of look at the relationships we already have, because I bet there's a lot of people in our own networks that, if asked or encouraged or just shown a little bit of what you're doing, could be really valuable to you. I know from personal experience, we've chased some of the bigger names and bigger deals. And I loved it when my mentors was like, you have everything you need. You have all of the relationships that you need. Go and tend to the beautiful garden that already exists in your backyard. And it was this beautiful advice. And what's been interesting about this time in the pandemic where we are remote, but in some ways we're a little bit more connected because the geographical boundaries, the flights don't matter, right? Like we've figured out how to work remotely. And so it's been this beautiful way of sort of reconnecting with people without having to worry about, are we physically doing it? Are we seeing each other at conferences? And then the second and last side to your question is, I think more people need to really lean into the public ecosystem. I sit on a couple of boards here in New York City, and it's amazing the resources that are being made available to women and to entrepreneurs and to investors even. And so I just really encourage people to really think differently about how you engage with them. A perfect example, I had a call with the Securities Exchange Commission yesterday. Now they're the regulator for venture funds in the stock market, right, securities market here in the United States. But yet the conversation, we were figuring out how we could help each other. And so again, it's a very different way to think of like how you would interact with the regulator, right? The people that are, supposed to regulate and police you. So I think ecosystem can show up in many different ways.
Right. And I would agree with that when you're interesting in terms of having the conversation with the regulators and at the SEC. And what I found is that, in my conversations with government agencies, the regulators, the policymakers, they've been more engaged, if you will, in terms of what they can do to be more active, to touch more individuals, whether they're women entrepreneurs, investors, just to learn from them in helping them do their work. So that's a very good point. And then they know another set of actors as well that could, sort of to be a part of the ecosystem. So, Ellen, how about you?
Sure. I mean, I think organizations are critical to helping support and guide women on that journey, especially those who are just taking that leap. It can be a difficult field to navigate, where to find your resources, where to find your funding, potentially where to find a brick and mortar. Not all of it is readily available. So I think by having that guidance and mentorship on the ground, I mean, libraries provide great resources, but there's women's business centers, SBA support, et cetera, that can really help people get that foundation that's critical to helping them establish themselves before they can scale. So I think that is the important first step and probably the most important person for a new entrepreneur to become familiar with. In terms of where I think there's improvement, I always think there's improvement in terms of policymakers, reducing barriers in cities and states, allowing businesses to start and grow easier. Sometimes that's also a complicated system to navigate. So I think by reducing the barriers to participation, you're going to have more businesses starting and growing, which will also contribute to your economic growth and therefore benefit your city, region, and state later on.
Right. And I think we'll sort of get to that maybe a little bit more on that policy piece a little bit later, not much later in the conversation, but because you're right. I mean, lowering those barriers from a policy perspective is very, very critical in order to allow, for entry into, and particularly into those markets that do tend to be, dominated or where you do not have the ability to penetrate because of, possible outdated regulatory barriers. So, Fredrika.
Yeah, I think from our perspective, working so hands-on with entrepreneurs on a daily basis in our innovation hubs, I think we normally see that all entrepreneurs, regardless if it's male or female founded teams, they need access to capital, which Caroline, you already touched upon, but also access to talent and access to network. So to your point, Ellen, of course, the entrepreneurial support organizations normally help with a lot of that, but thinking about the ecosystem at large, the involvement of not only investors, but also academia as well as corporates supporting with specific skill sets. Regardless of what company you're building, you need legal help at some point. Regardless of what company you're building, you need to recruit a team. If you don't have that experience in-house or with your founding team, those are kind of barriers that in the micro can be alleviated and solved by particularly entrepreneurial organizations like what we do. And on the other side, I just wanted to think about, on a bigger perspective, which actors would we like to see more engaged. When I think of it personally, I think that the people in powerful positions dominated globally. That's normally with middle-aged white men. And these forums these discussions that we have here today are fantastic. I think that women supporting women is just booming. We're doing that more and more across ecosystems in the small and the large. But men also need to be driving that forward in those positions. For example, just a couple of years ago, looking at Swedish boardrooms, if you had a boardroom in front of you, then it was more common to find to be named Johan, like the male name Johan, than to be a woman in those rooms. And that just kind of shows, we need the Johans to step up these issues.
All right, we need a Johan campaign.
Yeah, there you go.
I'll help you with that.
But, and we heard access to capital, access to networks, access to technical and training information, access to markets. And Fredrika, you mentioned, I think, all of these, and then started addressing this issue of who else needs to be more engaged, in the ecosystem itself. And you had mentioned, you started out, got the conversation rolling with men. And one other that I would throw in there, and I was very happy to see an earlier session on the education establishment, because I do think it's very critical to, a lot begins obviously with education, and getting education more involved in the ecosystem so that we can have an impact on education in those early stages, right? The primary, the secondary years, in terms of the skill sets, the mindset, who young children, young women are exposed to in terms of successful women entrepreneurs. So I just think what we're doing now in terms of helping women entrepreneurs, there's much more that we can do earlier on in those early education years. And so how we reshape education and hopefully to be a spark, for reforms and change. So that's would be what I would start out with in terms of who I would like to see more engaged in the ecosystem. And we could just, whoever wants to jump in, or we can go around the box one more time. Caroline, do you have any thoughts on that? And who else needs to be part of the ecosystem? Who needs to be more engaged?
It's a great question. And the first thing that comes to mind is, I think, providing women access to just a basic framework when it comes to paid family leave. When, we look at the US, getting our policymakers engaged and on board with that on a federal level is certainly top of mind. There's this really great, actually, a hub that The Economist put together, and I was looking through it a few days ago for Women's History Month, and they sort of break down where countries fall. And when we look at the US and our ecosystem here, we actually do pretty well in terms of a high share of women in management and on corporate boards in the US, but we have a lot of room for improvement in terms of paid family leave, and then also representation in government. And I think those two components are certainly tied together.
Mm-hmm. Very good.
Yeah, I would add too that when we think of ecosystem and we think of building our companies, I think we need to include the customers or the clients much earlier than we do right now. So often, the companies that we look at and we're looking to invest in, they come with an idea, right? And it's like, here's the idea, here's the problem we're solving. here's the team we want to put together, here's our ask for capital. And one of the things I'm always listening for is, have you talked to customers? Not just the small little beta that you put out there and some of your friends got on and did the Survey Monkey and were like, oh my God, this is great, right? Like, have you really talked to the people that are going to pay and find value in what you're building? And so I think we need to bring them in much earlier. You know, if your client, if you want LinkedIn to be your client, if you want the government to be your client, if you want Amazon to be your client, like, go talk to them now, because maybe before you even start building, they might tell you what they need help with. And they might even give you the capital, say, hey, if you can build this and do a pilot with our XYZ office in XYZ country, that could be really interesting to us. And now all of a sudden you're in the game and you've got someone who's, you know, invested in your success. So I think, you know, we start with this idea and then this build model, as opposed to going and having an idea and bringing into our ecosystem those for whom it's most needed for, and solve the problem with them. You know, so often we talk about startup and ecosystems and entrepreneurism, and it's this sexy thing right now. There's TV shows, right? The Shark Tanks are like the sexiest thing. One of my godchildren, like, that's what he watches. I'm like, you're 14, but like, it's his favorite show, right? So, you know, so much of what we're all doing right now, it's very sexy, but at the end of the day, it's problem solving. Now, I think that's sexy, but, you know, it's really about solving problems. And so I think we have to come at the ecosystem differently and at different points in the process, if that makes sense.
It makes absolute sense, Gayle. I think particularly, you know, so many successful entrepreneurs that we know, you know, continually go to their customers, right? Because they're the ones that they give them amazing, innovative ideas. And it could be that innovative idea or how to do something more effectively and efficiently that really scales their company and takes it to the next level, right?
Yeah, that's right. And listen, I'm going to say something, and I'm not an expert in it, but I'm happy to like help you figure it out. But there are companies and governments and agencies that have built technology and now want to put it out and have it commercialized, and are wanting people to come and take that technology and build companies around it. An example of that is NASA. NASA has a whole division that is their tech transfer division. And so these are people within NASA who are looking to take technology, and don't quote me on all this, and don't say, well, NASA, Gayla said, you said, but you know, they're taking the technology that was developed at NASA, but could have a non-space, non-astronaut application and could have commercial usage. And so we also don't have to recreate everything, right? Like, there is great IP, great intellectual property out there that we can take and build upon. That happens with governments, that happens with agencies like NASA, it happens at colleges, but there's not enough of us. And I think for women, this would be an amazing place, is to go and just grab some of that technology and build it out. Because the test case for it is there, right? Now it's just someone going and making it commercial for the bigger market.
Yeah, you're right. Or giving it their own unique look, right? That they can only bring, you know, to that, you know, to launch something. So, Ellen, how about you?
Sure. So I think diversity is something that can be improved upon, and something that will be an asset to community. I think entrepreneurship traditionally is viewed as white and male. And that's something we're seeking to overcome. I think we've come a long way, but still, in terms of capital, the amount that women, especially women of color, are getting is drastically less. But I think by not diversifying portfolios, they're alienating groups, but also it's not attractive to many people anymore to have all white male boards or all white male portfolios. So I think more people are seeking out these diverse companies, women entrepreneurs, veteran entrepreneurs, and underrepresented groups that are coming up with creative solutions to problems we're facing today. So I think that's really important to emphasize to the VC community, the alternative lending community, et cetera, that this can help them build robust portfolios, but also create economic growth in their regions.
Great. And Fredrika?
Can I just add to that, Ellen? Because it's no longer, it's been proven so many times now that we're not doing it for charity. We're not doing it because we want women, like it's good to have women, being represented. It's because it's more profitable. It's the smart thing to do. Female founded companies are more profitable, significantly more profitable than male founded companies. And if you add even more minority groups into that, then we're looking at more innovation, more profit, faster growing companies that are more successful. So it should be quite simple, which is like, why do we even have to argue this anymore? That's my feeling.
But it is still a continuous conversation that we have to have and continue to bring up. And we continue to see all white male boards on companies, a lot more white male founders that are still getting a significant chunk of the capital. So I think that's a conversation that still continues we need to push it, but also raise awareness in global communities that this is something that needs to be changed.
Mm-hmm. And when you say that males receive a significant or majority of the capital, just to emphasize, like the Nordics is lifted very often as the most gender equal part of the world. Last year, 93% of the risk capital, 93% went to male founded companies, not like mixed founded companies, only male founded companies, 93%. And that's in, one of the parts of the world where we are supposed to be the best at this. I think that's important to lift to in this. It's a lot of the capital goes to the male. No, all of it. All of it.
Yeah, but you know what also, and I'm going to throw this back at my sisterhood here, is we also have to stop asking and start just inviting people, because we got some good shit going on. Sorry, I don't know if I can use potty words, but we got some good stuff going on. I just put in the link a report that talks about female CEOs exit earlier and at higher valuations. And so, I talk about, how I'm comfortable party crashing and inviting myself and getting in the rooms and being at the table, right? And we've all heard the phrase, like, if you're not at the table, you're on the menu, or whatever the phrase is. In some ways, we stopped asking to be in those rooms and we just create the rooms. And so I love that we have this day together, because this is us creating room for ourselves. And now it's like, oh, it's a pity you're not in it, right? Yeah. Like, it's a pity that they didn't invest, because the returns that are going to come in that report I put in the link shows that they missed out. And we look at like diversity, and if you invest in diverse teams, which is what we do, there's also data, longitudinal data, that shows that your returns will be 30% higher. So when we talk to potential investors and they haven't invested in funds like ours, and they may or may not invest in us, and I say, gosh, that's so sad that you're going to miss out on that potentially 30% higher returns. Like, how can we help? You've got a problem.
And Gayle, I guess that just goes, we've identified players, that maybe be underrepresented and we want to get more engaged, but, is that the answer? It's sort of build it and they will come, I guess, type of approach, in terms of we just sort of do it and we've proven our success, then the actors will come, or is it a little bit of both? And I guess going to another question, does policy play a role in that at all? I think policy plays a big role in terms of creating favorable ecosystems, right? For women entrepreneurs, for capital formation, for accessing capital, for lowering barriers and things like that. But in terms of sort of the missing pieces of the ecosystem who should be more engaged, is it a sort of, you just sort of do it and they'll come and they'll follow success? Or do these missing players also have to be invited in? And then I'll add, if anyone has anything to say on the policy front, I'd like to hear your thoughts on that as well. So I'll throw it open. Caroline, do you want to, any thoughts that you might have on that?
Yeah, it's an interesting question that we think about a lot in the work that we do. Our fund doesn't specifically invest in female founders or ESG as a particular area of focus, but our model actually really lends itself. We've institutionalized the friends and family round, so it really lends itself to promoting and leveling the playing field in terms of representation. Well over 50% of our founders in our existing portfolio or are from diverse and historically underrepresented backgrounds, and 32% of our founders in our portfolio have a female or are female. So we see, in the, just for reference, the industry average is 20% of female founders. So, we see this access to capital when you are able to deploy in the earliest days of the development of the company. You are able to capture this segment of the market that just does not necessarily get access otherwise. And when you think about who might have access, it's no surprise that's typically well-off, well-educated, white men who've had foundationally every level of support going into that journey. And that can take, a year of salary gone, forego a year of their salary. So being able to provide that check around $200,000 to support the first year of starting a business makes a world of difference.
Yeah, I agree. Any other thoughts on that in terms of the, how do we bring people in, or just anything on the policy front, that, the importance of policy in terms of strengthening the ecosystems?
Not on the policy side, but on the first part of it, bringing people in. Like I said, we are founded by unicorn founders, and they specifically said that, the reason they founded their company from the beginning was because they saw role models that were like them. Stockholm is, after Silicon Valley, the city in the world that has created the most number of unicorns per capita, like Skype, like Spotify, like Mojang, like King. And all of these companies, all of these unicorns are founded by white male men that we already, that's not a surprise, but they were role models for the younger generation. So I think part of this is also supporting more female entrepreneurs so we can have more role models, because that's one way to attract an audience and to show the success stories. It doesn't have to be unicorns specifically, but I think that is that just shows again and again, if we have more role models, we're also going to have a lot of ripple effects from that.
I agree, and I didn't answer the first question in terms of who I thought really the most important actors are in the ecosystem, and I think it is the successful women entrepreneurs, those who are able to role model their success, and sort of go through the how-tos, can be a leader in terms of making other changes, funding other businesses, bringing men along, and changing, I think, the dialogue in so many other ways. So that to me was one of the most important actors, is getting successful women entrepreneurs, involved and keeping them involved and leading in ecosystems. And I think that makes a huge difference on the success of ecosystems, whether it's at, a small ecosystem at a local level, within the city, or, at the national level. So,
I think the other way to think about it too is that it's like equality and inclusion, that everyone has a role to play, right? Everyone has a role to play. And so is there a place for policy? Absolutely. Is it encouraging capital and allowing for free markets and new innovation, right? Does it start at the education level? Absolutely. But I think everyone has a role to play. And so what's beautiful in what Fredrika was saying was how here were very successful people that had built and built a success into unicorn valuation and are in a place now where they can distribute that knowledge and those resources and that capital, right? And we don't have to wait till the we've made it stage of our lives or our careers, right? But we all have a role, and no, not all of those roles have to come with dollar signs or checks or any of that, right? But there are roles we can play. I see it every day in my life, from a board member inviting me to a meeting, and that's him, letting me have a seat at the table, right? To sharing deals and resources. And again, those don't, and I got one the other day. It was so lovely. It was from one of the investors in our fund. He is a doctor, so he's frontline right now with everything that's going on with COVID, and just wrote a lovely email saying, I'm so excited to be an investor in your fund. Thank you. And I just thought, my goodness, with all that he has going on with COVID and, the medical profession, that he stopped to want to just tell me, that he's so excited to be a part of the WOCstar fund. It was that, lovely words that I just need to hear that day. But they were so powerful and moving and just sort of gave me the energy and, to keep going. So we all have a role to play, and it can be big or small, with a check or without.
Absolutely. Anything else on the policy front?
Sure. I mean, I think policymakers can certainly set the tone in terms of women's entrepreneurship or making a more hospitable environment for underrepresented groups in communities. So whether it's via a policy or pushing minority and women-owned business certifications or prioritizing contracts and procurement for businesses that have these certifications, I think that definitely can set the tone for a community to put more support, whether it be resources and capital, towards these businesses to ensure that they are represented in their communities. But I think that definitely starts at the policy level, whether it be registering your business, registering for taxes, et cetera. That can be a very tedious and cumbersome process that I think the government can take a hard look at streamlining and making it an easier process for people to start and grow that business.
Agreed.
Yeah. And you see the success when you see places like Dublin, Ireland, right? Like they made a concerted effort to be a tech destination. You see it in places in the South, like Atlanta and places, right? Like that was partnerships between mayors and governors and local officials and businesses and academia, those college campuses that are there. Like there's precedence and there's some good modeling that we could look to.
I think we have a lot more conversations about one-stop shops for businesses. So one place they can go to find all of these resources they need to start and grow that business, instead of having to go to the registrar's office or the tax office or the permit, of having to send people 5 different places to get something. You can go one place, get your business resources, and go on your way. I think that's one way to encourage people to take that next step, and also do it in a way that's legal and sustainable in communities.
Absolutely. I mean, I could talk for an hour on policy. We're just in the throes of it. Certainly the policy environment during COVID-19 and how governments responded to that, and sort of how they designed, for example, some of the access to capital programs, whether it's PPP or Paycheck Protection Program or EIDL here in the US. I mean, there was just, there's certain things I think that are done, that have to be intentional, about programs like that, whether they're emergency critical programs that need to be done in response to something, or if it's for the long term, just recognizing sort of where women are, in terms of their business startup. Self-employed, in the service industry, And you just want to make sure that those types of programs, and we've had to change them along the way, are designed in a way that are actually going to be reaching, women entrepreneurs. They didn't have the traditional maybe relationship with the banks that other, businesses did. So anyway, so policy, again, COVID-19, but also in terms of, again, just lowering barriers, to access to markets, whether it's global trade. I mean, it plays a huge role in terms of creating opportunity.
Yeah, I think one thing that was exposed, but we're not talking about as much, that was exposed as part of COVID and the U.S. government's relief package and loan program for businesses was that many of the entrepreneurs in the United States weren't able to access that in a meaningful way because at the end of the day, they are still solopreneurs.
Right.
And so we're not talking about that. So I think for us, the lesson from that is part of how we build companies is we need to be building them with others. And the statistics are there that show that most of women entrepreneurs are solo entrepreneurs.
Right.
Now, yes, when we think of Tesla, we think of Elon Musk. Yes, when we think of Facebook, we think of Zuckerberg. But it's not a solopreneur enterprise. And so even as we think of how we as women build companies, we have to be thinking about who are we building with. And so we don't stay stuck in the solopreneur cycle that we're in right now.
So, Gayla, with that in mind, it's something that's always top of mind for me. I mean, a question for everyone here. How have you expanded, your network and grown your support system as you've built a formidable business of your own and are investing in other businesses?
Yeah, great question. I mean, for us, it's been very intentional. My team and my staff have been great, a part of it, but we've been very intentional about who and how and where we ask. And so part of it is about the ask. We've got a great board, we've got great advisors, and we're very intentional, right? Like we talk about micro mentor moments. No one wants to adopt a big brother or sister, right? Like if someone came to me today and was like, hey, can you be a big brother, big sister to this person? I'd be like, oh my God, I'm so crazy busy. But they're like, hey, if you've got 5 minutes, 10 minutes, you'd be like, you know what, I could do that, right? So we talk a lot about being intentional with these micro mentor moments. And so I think that's really helped us to expand our network, to your point, because we're not asking people to like adopt us and adopt Gayla, right? Like, like this is great, this is an hour, but like 2 hours of me is probably more than anyone could take, right? So like, how do we have those quick moments of where we can help each other? And it's the other way too, right? Like I have 10 minutes, I have 15 minutes, right? I can make that available to someone else. I can make that available to people here, right? That's how we build. And then the other thing with it is we show the outcomes. And we're always about the follow-up. And that, hey, thank you. Because of that, this happened. Or, hey, 2 years ago when you were telling us this, last week, XYZ happened because of something you were telling us. Mm-hmm. And it's those moments where people are like, wow, I'm happy to be a part of that. But yeah, great question.
That was good, Gayla. That really was. And I guess to follow up on that with the group, in terms of, what do you think your single most important action that your organization or you have taken to impact or help, women entrepreneurs? And when you took it, was it clear that it would have such an impact at that time? Ellen, does anything come to your mind?
Sure. So we are a very large global organization in 180 countries. So we do have a large representation. We don't only deal with female entrepreneurs, but inclusion is a huge part of the work we do and very important to us. Global Entrepreneurship Week each year in all 180 countries that we operate in, and inclusion is always one of our themes. We always seek out stories from women entrepreneurs that have been successful that we can share with our country's that we operate in. And we want to elevate those stories and shine a spotlight on the work they're doing to inspire others. That entrepreneurship is a career choice that they can take. So, or inspire anyone at any stage of their entrepreneurial journey, whether they're taking that side hustle and turning it into a business, or whether they're seeking their seed round. So I think that that's really important. Part of our mission is really engaging our network, but also sharing those stories, I think, is the most important work we do to inspire people.
It's had a huge impact. I mean, celebrating success and inspiration stories are just so important to the ecosystem, you know, just to continue to build momentum and to strengthen it. So it's a great week. It really is. I look forward to it every week. It's a happy week, right? It's one of
it's a happy week.
Fredrika, how about you?
There are several things, both where you started off today, Kerrigan, with the GPs talking about actual representation, not only from women entrepreneurs, but also from female investors. Our investment team has, during the majority of the part of the time it's been set up, been dominated by women, by female GPs as well as LPs. And it makes a huge difference. It makes a difference both in terms of representation of, you know, the potential we see in the solutions that we are evaluating, but also in terms of statements of just being the one or two females in the room where we have invited, you know, a group of 150 investors to Impact Week, which Norrsken is throwing a similar theme in the Nordics. It makes a difference having female representation from the investor side. So that's something that I don't think we thought about too much in the beginning, but that has shown clear effects during our investment time. And then another thing just regarding our innovation hub. So we have 150 startups, that's early stage startups that sit in our hub today. And when asking them how much they help each other, 7 out of 10 startups help each other on a weekly basis. So these micro moments that you're talking about, Gayla, they don't have to help each other, but they do. As particularly in exchanging learnings, in exchanging ideas, but also partnering on projects or hiring employees. So looking for tech developers right now is impossible because you can't pay the same wages as the major tech companies can. But if you can pull together, you know, fantastic candidates that are looking to work for purpose-driven startups, that's win-win. So I think another then, you know, clear where we have supported female entrepreneurs is through our hub, which is 50-50 split, male, females, but where these what call it peer-to-peer exchanges and learning sessions are created and facilitated.
Fredrika, that's amazing about the number of female GPs. Like, that's really awesome. What do you think made that possible? How did that come about?
I think we were just fortunate enough to have fantastic GPs from the very start that were with us from when we set up the fund. So that our first investment fund was, the capital came from 4 unicorn founders, but the team was led by females. And now the fund has attracted more institutional capital from, for example, the European Investment Fund, and become quite a lot bigger than it was from the beginning. But the same fantastic female GPs are still running it. So that's also, you know, being part of that growth journey.
Yeah, that's amazing. That's beautiful.
Yeah, very much so. Caroline, anything?
You know, definitely, as I mentioned, it's you know, baked into the Antler thesis and the Antler model to you know, support and promote founders in the earliest stages of development, and that extends and promotes a increased amount of representation across the board. Another part of the work that we do, and I do specifically, that's really wonderful and engaging to see, is we work with our founders that we've invested in very closely post-investment. So we provide very much hands-on executional support. So being able to see the connections that we can facilitate you know, for our founders to get them in a place where they can rapidly scale and have access to those resources is really wonderful to see. and having we just globally have a female founder network within Antler. And then, within the US, having an understanding of who we can reach out to, that's whether it's an advisor or someone in the ecosystem. And we do see a lot of female-led groups in New York that we can quickly connect our founders to is a huge priority. And, I thought about it a lot coming in here today. What advice would I give for people, women setting out to work in VC or to start a business? And I think this extends across the board, no matter which industry you're in. You need to network. You need to be able to meet more people in order to grow and scale. And wherever you want to get in your career or scaling your business, look at that company you're targeting and find the woman on the board. Find the women in the organization and reach out. There's no guarantee that they're going to respond or follow up. That's just part of life, but there's a higher likelihood that they will. And I think there's a tremendous opportunity for those moments of micro mentorship that we discussed.
Yeah, absolutely. I would, in looking back on 26 years of policy and, some of the things that my organization has done, I would have to say, particularly because I'm seeing the results now, we, SBE Council, led the effort on the legislative changes on equity and debt-based crowdfunding. And, really from the beginning, we said, this will democratize access to capital. We have rules in place, that have been around, since the 30s, where we want a system where women entrepreneurs, minority entrepreneurs and startups can actually, access capital outside of the big venture hubs, whereas, they can't really access that capital. No one hardly can. And so where we are, that passed, it was signed in 2011. It took 4 long years for the SEC to write the rules around that. But now we're seeing the results. I mean, it's extraordinary to see 5,000 companies, 30%, 40% women entrepreneurs actually utilizing investment crowdfunding, going to ordinary investors, ordinary people, to access the funds that they need, and doing it very, very successfully, and building strong local businesses that have scaled and that continue to scale. So, people can raise up to 1 million. We got the rules changed. Now they can raise up to 5 million. But we really are seeing that on a monthly basis now, sort of the growth in equity and debt-based crowdfunding, $30, $50 million, per month. And again, women entrepreneurs, 40% of those raising money on these crowdfunding platforms from both, sophisticated investors and ordinary investors, sort of working together, vetting these deals. And all they have to do is they have access to these investors that they've never had before. So for me now, and I think this is going to continue, this is going to explode, particularly given the need for our economy to recover the large amounts of people that we see starting businesses at this point in time. And I'm very excited about that. And hopefully we could see additional changes and see more growth in that area. So, and also women becoming investors as well, investing, in companies. So it works both ways. So we talked about a little bit about examples of, how ecosystems, have created access or create access for women entrepreneurs to grow and scale their businesses. Maybe, we could talk a little bit about that, such as, New York City has created. And then, maybe you all can just sort of talk about why has, what is the difference between a supportive, what makes the difference between a supportive ecosystem and those really where they've maybe not had as much success? Is there a recipe for success? Are there models for success? that we can take away and that we can learn from.
Exactly. We only have 2 minutes left before the session is ending, but maybe we can just go.
I thought we had an hour and a half. Okay, so there we go.
So maybe we can just go around and say, what's the secret recipe? If someone
there you go. What's the secret? Yes.
Okay. What's the secret sauce made of? Caroline, what would you add as the ingredient?
Oh, I would say promoting female investors, female founders, and on a personal level, making sure that no matter where we sit in our particular subsections, that we're engaged with those other sectors, active in policy and supporting candidates that will promote the policies we need to see, the strides that we want taken.
Fantastic. Ellen, what do you think?
I definitely think access to capital is key. I don't think anyone can really grow without that kind of element. But I also definitely think mentorship and resources to help people get off the ground, specifically for women, whether it's a women's business center, or is going to be crucial for that.
Yeah. And I guess I would add that the ones that I've seen be successful, so the ecosystems and the cities and communities that have been successful, is they've had real intentionality around what it was they were building. Like, do they want to be a tech hub? Do they want to be a hub and a destination for creatives and creators? Like, they had a real vision and intentionality. And then there was a lot of buy-in from everyone and a way to add your voice of like, this isn't what we do want, this is what we want. And then everyone had a role.
Yeah.
I'm going to add female role models, stressing that we have to include more role models, putting the spotlight on more fantastic women entrepreneurs. That's going to have fantastic ripple effects. Karen, final word from you.
Well, I think all of what you've said, I'll echo that, and the intentionality, and also go back to what Gayla said. I mean, you sort of are building these ecosystems, and it's continually going back to the customer. I mean, who are you serving, right? The women, just to know sort of what the ecosystem needs. Are you meeting the modern needs, and are you filling the gaps, that really need to be filled, in that ecosystem, to meet needs moving forward. So, I guess we did pretty well without our moderator, but we missed her, didn't we?
It was wonderful.
Clap to all of you. Great job. And, it was great to be a part of this event. And, I think if folks listening in, they could probably contact the organizers to see where they need to reach us. But it seems like probably with social media, people can find us pretty quickly, right? On LinkedIn or Twitter or what have you. But thank you all. You did a wonderful job. And I look forward to building our own little ecosystem here so we can continue to move forward. So thank you.
Awesome. Happy Friday, everyone.
Happy Friday.